Within the philosophy of Kingian Nonviolence, we have what's called the 6 steps of Kingian Nonviolence, which is really about how to implement all the principles and all the studies about conflict into a campaign for social change. And the first step is information gathering. Oftentimes, when there's an incident of injustice in our communities, a lot of people like to jump right into the protest without gathering the necessary information to really understand the issue. Gathering information about both sides' perspectives on the issue, gathering information about the history of that conflict, and really understanding what that conflict is about and being able to articulate that. Once you have that information, the second step of Kingian Nonviolence is education. So you need to educate your community about the information that you found. And specifically, we need to be strategic about identifying the leaders in our communities, whether it's ministers or teachers or community leaders or just people from the block who hold a lot of weight in their community, and educating them so that they can go on to educate their community about the issues of injustice. Once you've educated your community, step number 3 is personal commitment. And that speaks to committing to the long-term process of change. A lot of people don't know that the Montgomery bus boycotts lasted 381 days. And in today's movements, and many of today's movements, we feel like the only commitment that we need to make is to attend a one-day protest. And we really need to be committed to the long term. But also in personal commitment, we talk a lot about how the work for social change it's not easy. And so often it's easy for us to get burnt out, and it's easy for us to get bitter, and we need to find the things that we can do in our own lives and within our own movements that keeps us personally committed to that and keeps our spirits lifted, whether it's singing freedom songs in the civil rights movement, or meditating, or going for a run, or writing poetry. Whatever it is that keeps you personally committed to your goals, we need to identify that and know that that's an important part of building a social movement. The 4th step of Kingian Nonviolence is negotiation, and it's the most important aspect of the 6 steps because we believe that negotiation is where conflict is resolved. Conflict is always resolved through dialogue. Now, one of the important things about Kingian negotiation is that we believe that only equals can negotiate, because if one party has more power than the other, then they can just easily say, okay, well, we've heard your concerns and we don't really care. Or they can say, well, you know what, we don't really want to negotiate with you. And when there is that power imbalance, that's when we move into the 5th step of Kingian Nonviolence, which is direct action. Now, direct action is oftentimes the only thing we think about when we think of the civil rights movement or any movements. And so much so that oftentimes it gets to a point where it seems like the direct action becomes the goal in and of itself, as opposed to direct action becoming part of a larger organizing strategy that gets you closer to a goal. So within the framework of Kingian Nonviolence, direct action is something you use to give yourself leverage so you can go back to the negotiating table as equals. So if someone refuses to negotiate with you, maybe if you sit outside of their office with 1,000 people, that will give you the leverage that you need to open up that door and to be able to have that negotiation in a genuine way. Another reason why we use direct action is to dramatize the issue and to bring the conflicts and the injustices that are prevalent in very isolated communities into the forefront of society. So within the framework of Kingian Nonviolence, direct action has a very specific role. The goal of direct action is to always go back to the negotiating table and to try to resolve the conflict there. Now, once you resolve the conflict, the critical and the necessary last step in Kingian Nonviolence is reconciliation. Oftentimes, through the course of an organizing campaign, a lot of conflicts come out and feelings are hurt, relationships are damaged, and sometimes when we quote-unquote win a campaign, we'll laugh at their face and say, aha, we won the campaign, you all lost. Reconciliation is about bringing those parties who were in conflict together so that they can both recognize that they're both winning, that they both gained something out of the change that they were able to agree on, and to celebrate that victory together. It's not about separating two parties that are in a conflict so they're not throwing fists at each other anymore, but about bringing those parties together and really being able to squash that beef and really being able to reconcile that conflict so that conflict no longer exists.